There's no reason why he should have been on the street at the time the Tate killings went down. He was living at the Swan ranch, not a place where probably normally is expected to live. He had access to alcohol, narcotics, illicit sex. There were just so many things going down which were criminal in nature, but no action was taken.
What if there was a recipe for changing society's mind?
Hostile actions against United States ships on the high seas and the Gulf of Tonkin
That started with a disaster, disaffected millions, and benefited just a few.
As you all know by now, my name is Oliver North.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
What if below the big block print headlines that history is remembered by?
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night.
Complications from several...
Sticky little asterisks, footnotes, and asides could show a pattern that goes beyond coincidence and into conspiracy.
Welcome to Illuminati headquarters.
10 American scientists have died.
Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Swan Song of Flower Power. Part 1. The story of Charles Manson is a rabbit hole the size of Texas, with so many ends you could fill a room with all the connections. Tom O'Neill whittled it down to about the size of the Bible. Errol Morris cut it down to 96 minutes. And I aim to finish it off before my coffee gets cold. The narrative.
Go ride a horse. Go ride a horse.
What do we know about Charles Manson? We know that he was a psychedelic cult leader, over 100 followers strong, who used sleep deprivation, LSD, uninhibited sex, and mind control to break down his followers into programmable computers that would kill on command. We know that on the night of August 9th, 1969, Charles Manson instructed his followers to go on a killing spree in Laurel Canyon.
In a scene described by one investigator as reminiscent of a weird ride, 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate, who starred in Valley of the Dolls, was 8 months pregnant.
A day later, Manson and his followers took 2 more lives in Los Feliz, slaying Leno and his wife Rosemary LaBianca. The crime scenes were horrific. The bodies tortured, stabbed, and choked. In an ultimate FU, the killers had playfully written on the wall in their victims' blood. So why do we know all of this? Because it was carefully laid out in graphic detail in the best-selling true crime book of all, Helter Skelter.
If you look at this White album, it's a Beatles album. There are many other songs. One of them is called Sexy Sadie. Sadie Glutz, also known as Susan Atkins, whatever you want to call her, she thought that the Beatles named this song after her.
Author Vincent Bugliosi knew everything there was to know about Charles Manson because he was the lead prosecutor on his murder trial.
Manson envisioned that white people would turn against the black man if they thought the black man had committed these 7 murders, and ultimately there would be a civil war between blacks and whites out on the street. Manson told his followers that this would be a bloodbath in the streets of every American city.
Bugliosi explained Manson's motives to the public and a jury of how he'd used LSD and mind control to reprogram his followers into thoughtless killers, to bring about a race war that would end civilization. Now I'm just going to say, this is the first hole in the story.
Manson envisioned that black people, once they destroyed the white race and assumed the reins of power, would be unable to handle the reins of power because of inexperience, and would therefore have to turn over the reins to those white people who had survived Helter Skelter. So in Manson's warped, twisted mind, his family, and particularly he, of course, would be the ultimate beneficiaries of a black-white war.
Let's just put a pin in that and circle back.
Feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad. Open them. I'm not against you. Huh? Are you bitter? Bitter? No.
Another detail that sticks out here in the trial to me. is what it must have been like for the Honorable Judge Charles H. Older to read over Manson's arrest record. Because if he did, and I'm sure he did because he's a judge, he would see that Charles Manson was an accomplished felon, spending nearly 20 years in prison before the Tate LaBianca murders.
By the time he was 37, the 5'3" Manson had a rap sheet boasting 50 convictions.
And here's where it gets weird. The judge would have also seen a laundry list of moments where Charles Manson was arrested and released between the time that Charles Manson got out of jail in 1967 and when he was apprehended for the Tate LaBianca murders in 1969. These are moments where Charles Manson, who was a felon on parole at the time, interacted with law enforcement and could have been taken off the streets for good, changing the course of history, saving the lives of 8 more or less innocent people.
I have a question. Are you guilty of any murders? Are you guilty of plotting any murders?
I killed a chicken once.
Any human beings?
No.
But this is the moment. This is the sun-dried tomato ruining an otherwise decent sandwich that cannot be overlooked. Sure, you can scrape it off with a knife and flick it in the trash, but you'll taste it. You'll still wonder, was law enforcement making a concerted effort to keep Charles Manson on the streets so that he could commit more crimes? I think he was. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear it from a retired detective of the LA County Sheriff's Department.
There's no reason why he should have been on the street at the time the Tate killings went down. Very simply, he was living at the Swan Ranch, not a place where probably normally is expected to live. He had access to alcohol, narcotics, and illicit sex.
You have to make love with it.
When I say illicit sex, I'm talking about minor girls. And all this was going down in with full knowledge of his parole officer as well as the officers at Malibu Patrol Station.
And machine gun.
Machine guns, right.
This guy isn't just some crashed out hippie failing piss tests.
I've been laying up here paying for your sins for 2,000 years.
This is a messianic cult leader wielding a machine gun on acid, stealing cars, and he's on parole.
The revolution is waiting for a spark. Everybody's ready. Everybody's got their guns together.
When I was at Malibu, we knew that there were machine guns being fired on the Swan Ranch. We had citizen complaints about this. We had firemen who were on the fire trails and were stopped by members of Manson's band who were armed with machine guns and told they couldn't go there because, you know, they were using this road or something. And while this was going on, we were forbidden to make arrests. There were just so many things going down which were criminal in nature, but no action was taken. All this information we were directed to put on a memo with a cover sheet so it couldn't be read by people who didn't have business reading it, and was going directly to intelligence via the station captain. And we don't know what intelligence was doing with all this information, but we do know that the officers in uniform were being used to a certain extent to keep Manson under surveillance. I don't know if Manson was under surveillance by intelligence or not. I can only speculate. My best guess is, you're damn right he was under surveillance. Yeah. If not by our intelligence, by some intelligence.
And if that wasn't frustrating enough for you in hindsight, here's another instance of where justice could have righted itself, but did not. Let's go back 2 weeks before the Tate LaBianca murders to July 27th, 1969, Topanga Canyon. After being tortured for days in his Topanga Canyon hillside home, Gary Hinman, a Buddhist musician, was stabbed to death by Bobby Bussolil. Bobby Bussolil is arrested a week later on August 6th, 1969, 3 days before the Tate LaBianca murders. And Bobby is picked up by California Highway Patrol, and the arrest falls under the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Office, or LASSO as I like to say. LASSO, LASSO, LASSO. Now Bobby was a member of the Manson family and lived at Swan Ranch. And LASSO has been extensively surveilling the ranch with strict orders not to engage. So they know Bobby murdered somebody and Charles Manson is his leader. But they don't nab Charles Manson or the rest of the bunch for it because they've been told not to. And it's frustrating because the police could have stopped Charles's whole operation right there and prevented the Tate LaBianca murders from ever happening. But they did not. So Bobby Bussolil is charged for the Gary Hinman murder. And then 3 days later, there's another horrific murder where the victims were repeatedly stabbed less than 10 miles away. 49 minutes if you take the 1 to the 10 to the 405. And if you're CSI Miami's David Caruso, you don't need a laser, a Hummer, or a lab to find a connection here, because it's written on the wall in blood. At the Hinman crime scene, police found the words "political piggy" painted across the wall in Hinman's own blood. At the Sharon Tate crime scene, the word "pig" was written on the door. Now, that's enough to make David Caruso put on some shades and go kick some ass. But it wasn't enough to get Lasso to bring the rest of the Manson family in for questioning. So a day later,
while the police admitted they had no suspects in the Bel Air massacre, there were 2 more murders 15 miles away in the Silver Lake section of Los Angeles. Market owner Leo LaBianca and his wife Rosemary were found by their children stabbed and mutilated. The word "war" was carved into LaBianca's chest, and "death to pigs" was smeared in the blood of one of the victims.
There you have it. Despite a trove of evidence connecting Manson to the murders, the big bad wolf just continues to huff and puff and blow people's houses down. Now, in Vincent Bugliosi's book, as we discussed earlier, Bugliosi chalked this up to a communication breakdown between departments and human error. Lasso had the Hinman case, and the LAPD had the Tate and LaBianca cases, so they didn't make the connection in time. Only they did. Lasso detectives Charles Gunther and Paul Whiteley reportedly went to the LAPD and told Sergeant Jess Buckles about the connection between the Hinman murder and the Tate LaBianca murders. Now, the LAPD brushed off the coincidences and took 3 more months to connect Charles Manson to any of it. Charles Manson was the Michael Jordan of getting out of jail, and his winning streak would be pressed once again on August 16th, 1969. Now, mind you, this is just 6 days after the Tate and LaBianca murders. Over 100 police swarmed the 500-acre ranch and serve a warrant to Charles Manson for all the stolen cars the Manson family had accumulated. Police found a revolutionary's wet dream cache of weapons, illicit drugs, and underage women. 25 members of the family were arrested that day, only to be released days later, when a fairy princess waved her wand and someone noticed the warrant that had been drafted by a department head, signed by a judge, and circulated through dozens of hands at the LA County Sheriff's Office somehow had the wrong date. There are strings being pulled from behind the curtain here. Architecture is at play, and a pattern is emerging. Too many sticky little asterisks, footnotes, and asides are making connections that go beyond coincidence and into conspiracy. But who is pulling the strings? Who is keeping Charles Manson in play? Well, it's in the title of this video, but find out how we got there in part 2 of Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Swan song of flower power. It only gets weirder. Be sure to subscribe and find out more about Manson. And check out Tom O'Neill's book, Chaos. If you're a little bitch who hates books, check out Errol Morris's documentary on Netflix. And if you don't have time for any of that because you're a social deviant with incel tendencies who watches YouTube all day, check out part 2 of Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Swan song of flower power. Find out who's really pulling the strings. Was it the flowers or the swans? I don't know. We don't know. Let's find out.